Friends, today I'm going to explain a Spanish psychological horror thriller movie. The name of the movie is Sleep Tight. It is one of the best psychological thriller movies I have ever watched. This movie has received a 7.2 star rating on IMDb out of 10 and has also achieved a 100% rating in other places. The movie is eerie, and by the end of watching it, you will feel a strange sensation, just like I did. So without further ado, let's dive into the main video. At the beginning of the movie, we see a man named Cesar, who works as the caretaker of a large building. He is a very unhappy individual who always feels that everything in his life goes wrong. No matter what good happens in his life, it never brings him any happiness. Cesar derived immense pleasure from seeing others unhappy and would get extremely angry when he saw people happy. He always indulged in activities that caused pain or sorrow to others. Now, we see him getting out of bed, fully prepared, and leaving a room. Whose room this was, and with whom Cesar had been sleeping, will be revealed later. Next we see Cesar heading to his workplace, where he is responsible for overseeing the residents of the building and taking care of various small tasks. On the other hand, we see the same woman with whom Cesar had been sleeping. Her name is Clara. Cesar used to drug Clara and sneak into her room at night, spending the entire night sleeping beside her. Then, at dawn, he would leave Clara's room. Since Cesar was the caretaker of the building, he had access to the keys to every room. This is how he spent his days. Or, you could say, Cesar would spend his nights elsewhere. However, a little girl named Rosala, who lived in the building, discovered Cesar's secret. As a result, she started blackmailing him, forcing him to give her money and food. Even though Cesar didn't want to, he had no choice but to comply. Now, whenever Clara was leaving for work, she would have a brief conversation with Cesar. Clara was always in a good mood, which made her consistently happy. This was something Cesar absolutely despised. Later, Cesar visits his mother in the hospital because she was chronically ill and had to stay there. Cesar would occasionally visit her. During their meeting, he confesses to his mother that he cannot stand seeing anyone happy, especially Clara, and this made him deeply disturbed. Soon, Cesar decides to take a drastic step, which leaves his mother deeply saddened. This indicates that his mother was already aware of his psychological disorder. At this point, Cesar appears to us as a kind of psychopath. However, it's a relief for us introverts that we are spared from such tendencies. As introverts, we don't usually display happiness outwardly. We feel joy internally, but don't express it as much. How many of you introverts can relate to this? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments section. Anyway, Cesar returns to the building, where the manager scolds him for being late. Just then, a woman who lives in the building approaches Cesar and requests him to look after her dog for one night. Cesar agrees to take on the responsibility. That night, Cesar goes to the woman's room to take care of her dog. Inside, he gives the dog its food, but he intentionally takes a small piece of food that the woman had kept for him and feeds it to the dog. His motive is to make the dog sick after eating that food, as I mentioned earlier. Even seeing the dog's happiness didn't make Cesar happy. Instead, it made him feel sad. A while later, we see Claire returning home from work and lying down on her bed to rest. However, we notice that Cesar is hiding under her bed. Once Clara falls asleep, Cesar comes out from under the bed and uses chloroform to render her unconscious. After that, he goes into her bathroom. In the bathroom, Cesar contaminates all of Clara's cosmetic products with harmful chemicals. Afterward, he lies next to Claire in her bed. He spends the entire night in her room, and in the morning, he carefully cleans up, prepares himself, and leaves. On his way out, he notices a picture of Clara with her boyfriend. As Cesar leaves Clara's room and heads to work, Rosala spots him. Seizing the opportunity, Rosala blackmails Cesar again, this time demanding he bring her an adult movie. Though shocked by her request, Cesar reluctantly agrees. Meanwhile, as things start to settle, we see the woman whose dog Cesar was taking care of taking the dog to the vet. The dog had developed diarrhea, likely due to the contaminated food Cesar had given it earlier. Before leaving, the woman has a brief conversation with Cesar, during which he interacts with her, as if nothing unusual has happened. Before finishing his conversation, Cesar says something to the woman that makes her sad, which in turn makes him happy. Later, we see Clara using the cosmetic products in the morning as she gets ready for work, unaware of the harmful chemicals Cesar had mixed into them. Before heading to the office, Claire briefly talks with Cesar and remains cheerful throughout the conversation. However, this makes Cesar even angrier. Shortly after Claire leaves, Resala meets Cesar again. This time, Cesar gives her the adult movie she had demanded. As Resala leaves, she informs Cesar that to keep his secret safe, she will now require 100 euros instead of 60 euros. In the next scene, we see an elderly resident of the building yelling at Cesar because he had asked him to take care of his plants, but Cesar hadn't done so, and now all the plants had withered. Following this incident, Cesar visits his mother in the hospital and tells her that Clara is still very happy, but she won't remain happy for much longer. Hearing this, his mother becomes deeply saddened, knowing full well about her son's twisted mind, but being powerless to intervene. After returning from the hospital, Cesar speaks to the cleaning woman and her son, who also work in the building. He tells them that there have been several complaints about the office area being dirty. The cleaning woman blames her son for the situation and assures Cesar that they will clean it up as soon as possible. As evening falls, Cesar sneaks into Clara's room again and pours acid on her mother's watch, destroying it. He does this to upset Clara when she sees it. Afterward, he hides under her bed and repeats his usual sinister routine. The next morning, Clara wakes up and notices faint rashes on her face. While leaving for work, Cesar points out the rashes to her, saying, "That doesn't look good on your face." Cesar expects this comment to upset Clara, but instead, she leaves in a cheerful mood, which makes him furious. By the time Clara returns home later that day, she notices that the rashes on her face have worsened significantly. Over the next week, Cesar continues to mix harmful chemicals into her cosmetic products, causing the rash problem on her face to escalate. During this time, Cesar begins to mentally torment Clara further by sending her anonymous letters filled with disturbing messages. He even shares these sinister activities with his mother during his visits to the hospital, further upsetting her. Gradually, Clara's physical health starts to deteriorate as the psychological and physical toll of Cesar's actions begins to manifest. Cesar continues his schemes against Claire throughout the day. Although the rash on her face had started to heal, one day Claire discovers her room infested with cockroaches and insects. Panicked, she reaches out to Cesar for help. It seems likely that Cesar orchestrated this as another way to trouble her further. Later, we see Cesar entering Clara's apartment and taking some of her clothes and personal items, possibly to create opportunities for further manipulation. When Claire leaves for the office, she asks him to clean her apartment thoroughly. In the meantime, Resala appears and gives Cesar a knowing look, as if she understands what's happening. Later, while Clara is in the elevator, she mentions something odd, that she's been receiving strange messages from an anonymous sender. She's visibly puzzled by this and begins to suspect something, revealing that she has already filed a complaint about the matter. Cesar then visits his mother at the hospital and tells her that he used to be somewhat gentle with Clara, but from now on, he plans to be much harsher. His mother, distressed by his relentless obsession, can only listen helplessly. Back at Claire's apartment, Cesar begins cleaning by spraying insecticide around the house, further contributing to her torment. However, the building manager arrives unexpectedly and hints that Cesar might soon lose his job due to his increasing negligence and complaints from the residents. As investigators arrive at the building to find out who has been sending Clara the strange messages, Cesar becomes their first suspect due to his access to the keys for every apartment. However, Cesar cleverly shifts suspicion onto the cleaner's sons, claiming they might be responsible. Following this lead, the investigators devise a plan and arrest the two boys. They accuse them of plotting against Claire and even claim their intention was to kill her. This move helps Cesar temporarily escape suspicion later that evening. Cesar hides under Clara's bed with a knife, intending to kill her. However, things take an unexpected turn. Claire returns home much later than usual, and this time, she brings her boyfriend along. The two become intimate on the bed while Cesar remains hidden underneath. At one point during the incident, Caesar accidentally spills chloroform on himself, causing him to become disoriented and nearly lose consciousness. Struggling to stay alert, Caesar realizes he has to leave the apartment unnoticed. He attempts to escape with the help of his accomplice, Sam, trying to avoid detection by Clara and her boyfriend. Just as Caesar and Sam are about to leave the room quietly, something unforeseen happens, further complicating the already tense situation. Caesar attempts to open the door and escape, but the scene abruptly cuts off. The next morning, we find Caesar lying on the bathroom floor, suggesting that before losing consciousness, he managed to make his way to the bathroom. Clara is seen leaning against the curtain, seemingly unaware of Caesar's presence. It's evident that Caesar's escape has become incredibly challenging. Later, we see Caesar still in Clara's apartment, as Clara and her boyfriend discover an unfamiliar bag. Sam, Caesar's accomplice, discreetly picks up an identifying item from the bag and tries to leave the apartment unnoticed. However, Clara's boyfriend catches sight of him. Thinking quickly, Clara intervenes, explaining that Sam had been spraying insecticide the previous day and must have left some things behind. She hands him the bag, and Sam, feigning regret, apologizes and exits the apartment. The next day, Caesar arrives at work only to be stopped by his manager and the elderly resident who had previously confronted him. They hand him a letter, informing him that he has only 15 days left before he's terminated from his job. Caesar realizes his time in the building is running out and begins packing his belongings. While doing so, the woman who owned the dog approaches him. She tells Caesar that she and others will miss him. In response, Caesar coldly remarks, "You've grown much wiser now. You don't even have anyone to talk to anymore, and the neighbors here aren't friendly either." Hearing these words, the woman feels hurt and silently retreats to her apartment, clearly affected by Caesar's calculated cruelty. He prepares to leave, and the child is very delighted to see this. Just then, Clara and her boyfriend arrive at the scene. As they leave, Clara tells Fajar that they are going away for the weekend, and at that moment, Clara appears very happy. Seeing this, Caesar becomes extremely angry, but also feels deeply saddened that, despite all his efforts, Clara was not upset. Caesar's grief grows to such an extent that he ultimately decides to commit suicide. To carry this out, he climbs to the top of a building. However, just then, he sees Clara and her boyfriend returning to the building, and he decides not to end his life. Later, Sejal and we learn that Clara and her boyfriend had a fight, and the reason for this argument was that Clara was pregnant, though they both supported her. This led to a disagreement between them. After they both fell asleep, he, Caesar, emerged from under the bed and applied chloroform to both of them. He then completely undressed and began getting intimate with Clara. Making the situation clear to you, S.it is revealed that Clara is actually about to become a mother. The next morning, Clara's boyfriend comes to meet with Blazer. He makes some changes in the room and takes Caesar along with him. However, upon entering the room, he realizes that Clara's boyfriend knows everything what Caesar did to Clara. Following this, Caesar attacks Clara's boyfriend from behind, and a fight breaks out between them. Amidst this chaos, Caesar stabs Clara with a sharp object. Then, he places his foot on Clara's boyfriend's neck, drags him to a container, and stages the scene by placing the sharp object in the boyfriend's hand, making it look like a suicide. Afterward, Caesar rearranges the entire room to make it appear as if a fight had taken place. The next day, several police officers arrive to investigate Clara's boyfriend's death, and Caesar is summoned as well. He tries to escape by claiming that he no longer works in the building, but he is arrested nonetheless. During the investigation, it is discovered that the 15-day notice period was used against him. During this time, the truth about the incident comes to light, and Caesar's reality is exposed. Sigil and Sayla also learn about it. That night, Caesar goes to Sayla's house and renders her entire family unconscious. He then threatens Sayla, revealing that he knows everything about her, where she goes to school, who her friends are, and much more. Caesar further tells Sayla that he is involved with her and is capable of doing anything, so she should remain silent. The next day, the investigation officer returns with Caesar to continue the investigation. During the questioning, Caesar mentions that a girl named Arcel lives in front of Clara's house and might know something about the entire incident. The officers interrogate Arcel, but in reality, Arcel does not reveal anything to them. Eventually, when Clara's mother comes to take her home, she says something that makes Clara even more distressed. Here, we see Clara in extreme agony, which signifies that Caesar's plan has succeeded, and he feels very satisfied with the outcome. A few months later, a scene shows Clara holding a knife. She now has a child, who is Caesar's, though Clara is unaware of this. She believes the child is her boyfriend's, thinking perhaps the contraceptive measures failed. Meanwhile, Sejal writes a letter to Clara, revealing everything Caesar had done to her. Upon learning the truth, Clara discovers that the child is Caesar's. She then holds the baby and breaks down in tears, as it was never her fault. This means that this child will now forever remind Clara of the tragic ending of her life situation, and Clara will always remain sorrowful. On the other hand, Caesar will always be happy because this is what he wanted, finding joy in others' misery. This is where the movie Sleep Tight ends. So friends, this was the story of the Spanish psychological thriller horror movie Sleep Tight. It's truly horrifying and unsettling. Imagine how a girl's life was utterly ruined simply because she chose to be happy. I still remember the time I watched the movie and explained it. The horror keeps intensifying as you delve deeper into the story. What kind of psychopath was this man who enjoyed seeing others suffer? He murdered, threatened a little girl, ruined a girl's life, raped her. He had a child with her, but Claire didn't know it. Caesar later tells her that Claire will remember him forever and tries to commit suicide. Friends, tell us in the comments section how you saw this horror of the movie. I hope you liked the movie. If you like the video, please like it. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe me. I'll see you guys again in the next video. Until then, stay safe.